So we started? Yeah, sorry. Cam and Annabelle, thanks for coming back this week. It seems a lot longer than a week.
Yeah.
It's just, firstly, any big developments from from your perspectives over the last week?
Well, as you know, we put out our Advisory 3 that included that we were launching an expanded Boost program and a new Boost program, Boost Up, as well as ongoing Hayara, and that expansion means we've got $1 million between now and June that goes out the door to companies. And we know it'll be highly competitive, but you know, we're pleased with the ways in which we're varying it. But in the same period, in the same week, we've been working on all those other areas that we talked about last week, which is looking at the New Zealand Screen Production Grant and how it can be varied to support this situation, looking at how, you know, working with MCH and with NZ On Air on what sorts of packages might we be able to access in order to provide more support for production when production is allowable again.
Yeah. And Cam, obviously your rapid response RFP went out and you had a very good response to it.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Yeah, it does feel like it's a bit longer than a week since we last caught up. Yeah, look, we're in the middle of 2 rounds. So we had our normal funding round that the funding team are kind of working their way through, as well as the rapid response RFP. We've had a huge response to that, which I think just goes to show just how amazing, you know, the creative community is in coming up with ideas. Far beyond our expectations in terms of the response, which is obviously a challenge in and of itself, because we're going to have to work our way through that in a realistic way. To Annabelle's point, we are, I mean, Annabelle and I are probably talking at least every other day, if not every day. In fact, we've got another catch up after this, just to kind of work out how we can jointly continue to support the production sort of community, really. I think, if nothing else, what this is doing is kind of bringing us really, really tightly together and going, look, it doesn't matter whether this is a feature or a drama. I think the other point that I would make is, I didn't talk much about factual last week, but I think there is a big role to play here. I think the work that needs to go on and is going on, and I think there's some great work going on with the screen sector COVID team and the guilds around health and safety, and how we can kind of get to a point where we're shooting safely once we get down to alert level 2. This said, there are going to be real challenges around how we do that. And I think Annabelle talked a bit about that last time in terms of testing and all of those things. So there could well be some room for factual as well, which is sort of smaller crew, obviously doesn't deliver the massive employment that we're looking for, but does provide a level of content. So we're just kind of continuing to canvass the industry. As I say, we're in daily contact with MCH. Annabelle and I have both put forward, I think, the best cases we can in terms of, you know, rescue packages or whatever you want to kind of call it, stimulus packages, make good for productions that have started and need to get back up. And the good news is that the ministry is listening, and they're getting all that information and they're kind of pulling it together. What we can't tell you is, you know, what that looks like. And I guess Annabelle and I are both in the same position where you sort of go, well, look, sadly, we have to assume that we may not get very much at all because everyone is putting up their hands. So what do we do with what we've got? And then hopefully we get a level of stimulus because we are putting forward the argument that, you know, this is an industry that can get up and running quickly, can get people employed. Local content's going to be really important. You know, we're ahead of a number of the other markets like the UK and the US. So international opportunities, all those things. But, you know, in truth, as much as we are moving really quickly, I guess we probably haven't got much more news than we sort of had last week.
Feels like that way. And with one question around when we'll be able to get back to filming, have you got any sense from a government in terms of what they think is appropriate? Because there's obviously a lot of debate going on in the production community as well. Will you be able to film anything at level 3, or is it back to level 2, and what can you do within level 2? Is there any directives coming out of government in respect to that?
No, not at this stage. And I think in terms of our assessment of alert level 3 versus level 2, 2 looks more achievable. There's an advisory in there about social distancing, and size, when I believe the size of a gathering, alert 2 maybe as high as 50. So, but can you achieve social distancing? The other issues that we talked about last week is indeed that sort of toolkit of protocols of how do you make a safe set, and also the duty of care issues and the insurance underwrite issues. So, and the risk management if you're not typically set up by a bond. So yeah, I think there's quite a lot of factors, and we're keeping on working through all of those to try and get an answer. And I think it could be valuable to form a subgroup of SPADA that we could all work with to talk about how do you get up and running? What could we solve for everybody? So that could be something coming out of this meeting, that we all get together in a larger group of producers.
Because obviously the other big concern for people, which impacts some productions, but obviously enormously impacts the internationals, if we are in a situation, say back at level 2, where we can be filming, but the border remains closed, what are the implications for productions that either have existing productions that have international casts, or new projects that have are financed on the basis of international casts? Is there the potential for immunity passports that there's been talk of internationally, where someone would be allowed to travel if they could prove that they were, they'd been tested and were free, and then they quarantined when they got into the country? But obviously that's a much bigger issue than an industry issue. It's a government issue.
I think there is an announcement about borders today in the 1 o'clock. I saw that might be one of the topics. So yeah, I think it makes a big difference when you can bring people in.
Yeah, I think, it's hard. Sorry.
Oh, we've lost Cam.
Just a perspective on that, Rich. I don't know whether there are a lot of facts yet out there about all of this stuff. I think what we're seeing is, I think this government is taking this really seriously. I think this is absolutely about health and safety first. So I think we have to be realistic about how quickly we may be able to get anyone in. I think there will be highly likely to be a whole bunch of kind of other measures. I think Annabelle talked about these last week around an ability to test, perhaps randomly test, sort of digital ways to track and trace. I think there's going to be a whole bunch of measures that are possibly going to need to be put in place before we get to a point where there's a degree of kind of openness like we had. So, we could be looking at longer than we think. Hopefully not. Yeah.
Just going back to a point earlier that you touched on, Annabelle, in terms of the spec, internally, have you been able to advance your thinking on terms of what variations might be feasible to help projects?
We've been talking to producers as well, who've been feeding information to us directly, and we've also been talking to you guys, and that's been really helpful. So we've got a full list that's been going back and forth between ourselves and the Ministry of Culture, who work with us on the MCH screen production grant. And we're really looking at how do we make it possible to get more projects up more quickly, and in a setting where, of course, at the moment we don't have theatrical, in a setting where there is less available from platforms and international financiers, and all of those issues that the delays that can be caused. So we're doing that, and we're also doing it in partnership with NZ On Air, because we'd like to work out what are the ways that we can work together on funding projects, perhaps in ways that we haven't in the past been able to, and seeing if we can vary the rules around those sorts of things.
Yeah. And are those variations also looking how you could support existing projects that may be in production, obviously, delayed, which has big interest and implications for them?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It was actually our first set of things that we worked on, was what to do for productions that were in process. And so there's a set of things that we think will be really helpful for that we're in discussion with MCH. What has to happen with all of those is they are cabinet decisions, so we've got to get that paper finalised.
Yeah.
But we'll keep liaising with SPADA, and for us it's really helpful if people do have feedback about what to do. It's great hearing it. If people can do it through their specific guilds, that is really helpful to us, because then it sort of helps collate it. We don't mind receiving it, but if also it can be put through your guild, that's really fantastic. whether you're a member or not, I guess. I think the guilds would appreciate hearing, including
Yeah,
SPADA.
absolutely. I mean, as part of the COVID-19 group, there was this discussion that anyone who had feedback, even if you're not a guild member, please feel free to talk to the guild that you feel is most applicable to you. And SPADA's doors absolutely open to any producer who's not a member. If they've got ideas or thoughts, we're happy to have that discussion.
Annabelle, just going back to the grant and the paper that you're preparing at the moment, what's the sort of timeline of actually finalising that and that going to cabinet, or is that sort of just an unknown at the moment?
It is a little bit unknown. The first answer is as soon as humanly possible, and it's gone through a few iterations, and what we've got to manage is the workload within ministry at the moment is really high because they've got such a span of influence and decision making that they're dealing with across the whole cultural sector. But look, they're being incredibly responsive, looking at documents straight away, and I think we've got another version that we'll be putting back to you at SPADA very soon to get your thoughts. And we've got a meeting, I think, after this call with Cam, as Cam said, where we've got MCH on the phone about this topic. So
great.
Just on MCH, there's the Screen Strategy 2030 document is about to be released into the industry shortly, and there's been some concern amongst some of the production community that now may not be the right time to do it. With your knowledge of government, do you think, how will the current situation impact on how that document's received?
Do you want to go for that, Cam?
Sure. Look, what we're hearing from government at a sort of a base level is everything that you would normally be doing, we want you to continue to. So there is a level of, hey, we're still working, the machinery of government is kind of continuing, all the ministers are working, all the departments are working. So on the one hand, we are sort of being asked to continue to do the things we do. On the other, obviously, they are incredibly stretched because there is so much coming at them. So in terms of releasing the document, look, I would say that the ministry would probably say, yep, if there was a date in which this was supposed to be delivered to us, we would assume that date continued to be, the case. The obvious issue is how much airtime it'll get given everything else that's going on. If it's seen to be needed to be delivered by a certain sort of deadline, then I guess that if that deadline is now, then I think it makes sense to submit it.
Yeah, and I think they, as you say, Cam, they view it as business as usual. We have to do the 2030 strategy. No one knows when everything is going to be in a better place. So let's keep moving forward on thinking about the 3 and 10 year picture for the industry. And given that the 2030 strategy includes a lot of core principles of how to deal, how the industry should function, they will have a relevance across a COVID setting as well. But they'll need now to have a whole kind of COVID lens put over that document. And I suppose having the document is something to begin with, and then go, hey, it's interesting to look at what we thought a minute before COVID. How many of those things now need to be varied? But it's something that's fixed in time, and it's useful to have it. And I believe it's being circulated today amongst, a set of industry. It's not officially published yet. It has to go through the normal government processes, but a draft, I gather, is going to come through. And when I last heard about the 2030 strategy, it's a document a lot about the principles and issues and ways in which we can function. So, yeah. And the notion of working together is really important. Having a pan-industry group, I think, has proven to be quite good already because of the COVID group.
Yep.
And the fact that Cam and I, NZ On Air and NZFC, representing the screen industry together across all its many facets in terms of content creation funding, this just proves how important it is for those partnerships to happen.
Yeah.
True.
I mean, presumably everything now in terms of internally for both your organisations, but also the ministry, everything now is viewed with the lens of COVID-19 across it. And is that changed your thinking in terms, particularly in respect of boost. Has that changed your thinking in terms of business development for production companies and producers?
Yes, so the boost launched or sort of proposed or announced yesterday, the day before. It'll be up online next week. Already the expansion of spending on boost is a response to COVID, and also some of the ways in which we're devising the guidelines are in response to COVID. We're making it as flexible as we can. We want to bring in mixed slates as much as possible so that people can be flexible in the way that they put forward their ideas. We also will be putting a pretty tight time frame around it. Potentially we thought, we'd give people the usual longer period of time to read and absorb the guidelines and respond, but we're getting some feedback that people would like us to push this through as fast as possible. So it's conceivable once we put it out next week, it'll be 2 weeks to get back to us. And then we'll be doing everything we can to turn that round pretty quickly, subject to how many applications we get. We expect to get a lot. And we think that, if we've estimated we can give out 27, we're doing our best to see how well we can support a range of production companies and producers. Yeah.
And is there a particular focus around the boost in terms of, do you see it as general support for the production community, or is it an overriding aim from it to try get projects to as advanced a state as possible so that there can be things moving into production quickly?
Yeah, that's really how it's set up, and that's how it will also be judged. Your application will be judged on how well you pitch that you can be ready to go into production.
Yeah. And presumably for both of you, that's a big sell to government for a recovery package that our industry can move quickly and employ, particularly on the larger projects, high numbers of people quite quickly.
Yeah. I mean, we've been lucky enough to get a bunch of information out from our producers and production community around a bunch of kind of effectively production ready projects, and even sort of to the point of kind of giving us a sense of what the budgets might look like. So, it is useful to have that level of specificity to put through to MCH and to government so that they can actually see that. As I said, the fine line is trying to sort of juggle at what point will we be able to go out with some of these big opportunities versus some of the smaller. And I think there is that fine line. Maybe there's also the opportunity for a whole bunch of smaller things that can actually get up and running with a small crew and quite quickly deliver. So yeah, I mean, I think having tangible examples and even priced up is useful, definitely.
And Cam, are you finding from the networks, are they coming to you saying that they want specific type of programming at the moment, or they see an opportunity to do X? I mean, obviously from a government level, there's been the education program that's going to be happening on via television. Are there other things like that the networks are saying we really need X at the moment? Or
look, to be honest, we are, I mean, what we are hearing and what we're sort of seeing is local. Yeah. So the networks are definitely saying we want to be getting local production up, obviously, but local stories, which obviously perfectly suits us. We are also starting to see, though, the kind of, the ideas that, Annabelle and others would want to see, which is local stories, but that will sell, that are, big enough and have a good enough idea that they would actually sort of become sort of international export opportunities. I have to say, I guess what our priority has ended up being a little bit more of this week has been supporting the platforms. So the real issue for us, and the Film Commission have a similar issue with cinemas, is we need to have the platforms there that are actually going to kind of distribute this content, and they are, they're all absolutely struggling with no advertising revenue. So a lot of the work we've sort of been doing is around how we can support them and how government can support them, and that's, I think that's starting to kind of be formulated in a sort of another level of rescue package, which is a fine line, right? Because actually we want money for production, but we also need the platforms to exist so that they can actually kind of commission that production and play it.
Yeah. And what feedback are you getting from the distributors, Annabelle, in terms of how they're coping and because obviously they don't have an their premier outlet in terms of cinemas has disappeared at the moment.
It's a very tough time for distributors, and I think some distributors will be looking to review and refigure their existing arrangements.
Yeah.
And I do think that whole ANZ distribution scenario, we're going to have to think really hard about it. Certainly Jasmine in our marketing department has spoken to all of them. She gets a lot of interest and real engagement as well with the sales agents who still believe in the markets, as I mentioned last week. And that those sales agents are still significant aggregators for the streamers who, are trying to manage the inflow of people going, hey, how about us? So, yeah, I think the New Zealand distribution theatrical issue is very vexed, and it's one that we don't know when we'll be able to solve it yet, because we don't know when we move back to cinemas being open again. But even so, I think this period is resetting the frame for all distributors in this region.
And that was one of the questions that we had come through, was a suggestion that short-term funding be focused on streaming content, and also how can film amongst that embrace online distribution.
Yeah, and so we agree. It is accelerating that movement towards us. We have wanted to vary our guidelines regarding projects going to streamers, and also the screen production grant rules around that as well. And I think we obviously really keen that there's a fantastic ecosystem of cinema and streamer as well, which we are going to see practiced more effectively because of the very nature of what COVID's doing to this landscape of audience consumption of features. So yeah, I think it's really hard at the moment, but it may put us all in a really interesting space afterwards if there is any silver lining to these challenging times.
Yeah, and I saw in the Herald this morning that the Academy in Auckland has started doing its own streaming, has launched its own on-demand platform, which is releasing films through. I mean, obviously a concern for all of us, and particularly for New Zealand films, is whether the film festival will go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's still up in the air, isn't it? Yeah.
Interesting though, Richard. I was on the phone yesterday to the Doc Edge guys, and they've made a call early to take everything entirely online. Yeah. Which opens up an international audience that might not have actually been there before. But there's some really impressive technology that isn't just about streaming, right? I mean, look, and you guys probably know this far more than I, but the way that they're looking at kind of creating and curating the festival is still very much similar to what would be the case if you were physically in the cinema. So you can still watch the film. You can kind of watch it in an environment where, you've got other people watching it sort of alongside you, and you can engage and all those things. And I think that the platform they're using is actually a Kiwi one, which, is another example of kind of the disruption that this whole thing is bringing about, but the speed of change, which, look, I think what you're hearing from Annabelle and I is that, we have to embrace it. Yeah.
And Annabelle, do you see a place for the Film Commission's on-demand platform? That there might be an opportunity to grow that?
Well, we've been actually looking at pre-COVID to work out, should that platform be merged into another existing platform. And there is an argument for there being a New Zealand, portal, as it were, using the New Zealand brand, because the plethora of platforms that mean how do you direct someone to be interested and find our material. And obviously the TVOD platform that we have is about projects that are not represented, predominantly about projects no longer with the sales agent, who this is their only place you can find them. But I think this change will probably accelerate the ways in which we could reset our on-demand platform.
Just out of interest, have any of you had access to the latest viewing trends in New Zealand, just in terms of gaming and streaming?
in terms of streaming, I think there were some interesting articles about the use, the terabyte use of data that just went up exponentially and was higher than the Rugby World Cup in 2019. And that as soon as the larger streamers then reduced the way in which they were sending out their material, it dropped straight away. So that, in other words, you can see, because obviously streamers don't usually report that there was a huge impact straight away of people being at home, and that a lot of that impact was streamer related. We know that games worldwide have spiked 75%, but I don't have the New Zealand figures. And the worldwide figures on streaming is like 20 to 40%. Once again, they're not specific to any country. But I hear, and maybe Cam can talk more about the broadcast ratings, because I think at Broadcasting and Sky, they've all seen people watching, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, it's the rich irony of the situation we find ourselves in, that the local media platforms all right across the board, whether it be TVNZ, MediaWorks, Sky, and Stuff, NZME, the spin-off Newsroom, Business Desk, all of them have seen massive increase in audience. A number of the subscription-based platforms have seen increases in subscriptions from people, but the advertising revenue is just absolutely gone, completely through the floor. So, yeah, I mean, I think what is good, and one of the things that both Annabelle and I are making really clear into government is people are clearly engaging in local, like actually beyond anything that we've ever seen. And of course, we're all home, so the figures are a little bit kind of skewed, but actually we are all tuning in. We're tuning into the news and current events and local content like we never have before. So it just goes to show there is such a place for it.
Mm.
And do you have a sense in a broader government perspective? The pre-COVID, obviously, there was the talks going on around a potential merger between Radio New Zealand and TVNZ. Has that been paused, or is those talks still continuing, or do you have any sense on that?
Yeah, look, we've had a number of conversations within MCH about, and obviously it wasn't sort of so much a merger as it was kind of a piece of work about strengthening public media. I think where we've all kind of got to is right now we've got local media under real stress. So actually it's not really about public media per se. Radio New Zealand, TVNZ are obviously doing an amazing job. But actually we've kind of broadened the scope to sort of say, how do we address what is an obvious issue, which is local media under significant stress, which I think is great. So in the last week or so, Annabelle and I have been involved in conversations that have included the CEOs of pretty much every single broadcast media platform in the country coming together to sort of go, okay, what are some of the things that we think we should do as a sort of a sector, if you like, to address this. Yeah. And some of those things are pretty tactical, and a number of them are kind of longer term. But it's a very immediate issue.
Yeah. Just on the other end of the spectrum, international. Obviously, we have a situation at the moment where we're focused on local, and we may be forced to focus more on local because we won't have access to the international coming into New Zealand. But Annabelle, particularly, do you see opportunities in that international space? Should we be exploring more co-production treaty opportunities, for example, or is there opportunities around the fact that we may be able to go earlier than other countries, and that will be appealing to international?
Well, Annabelle, you're on mute.
Is that working?
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, we haven't taken the foot off the pedal in terms of international interaction and engagement at the moment, because for all that, it's difficult to be attracting production. No one would be doing that, but we're interacting a lot with our usual stakeholders regarding what will be the conditions that will allow them to come back, let alone the border issue, and what are they planning in terms of their production setups. So that's obviously really important to keep doing. And then in terms of international interactions around our partners, whether it be other screen agencies, we're still looking at what's possible to do at this time when we can be developing and partnering and getting projects ready to go, that is a very high priority for us. We're also using, we've got a series of meetings coming up with some of the streamers and studios around how do we best connect New Zealand producers, because I think even if we're focusing on the national production, we do need market and we do need finance for those projects, and we recognise that those things will be under pressure, and we don't want to be naive about that, but we cannot give up on the possibility of making work that is of interest to the globe and that they would fund. So that's important. In terms of co-productions, as you know, we've got something like 17 co-production treaties. At the moment, in terms of whether we would expand those treaties had been on hold because of waiting for the 2030, what was the industry's view on doing more co-productions. But it is, there's some real good possibilities with our existing partners. With Canada, there's a kind of digital element to that treaty, and I think NZ On Air has done a partnership under that treaty before. We've also, animation is something that may find a really strong place in this current and new world, and we really want to move on that. We'd like to be part of the Council of Europe, and we started discussions on that, and so we obviously want to keep those projects moving forward, ready for the day when we can start up again, or to indicate that we can create content here, so how about we work together. Should if New Zealand really does crush the curve, then we're in a good place.
Yeah. Do you think there'd be the ability, because obviously the majority of co-productions have a minimum of sort of 80-20 or 70-30 split. Yeah, if the border restrictions remain, do you think that there could be some discretion shown to make those percentages lower, so a higher percentage for New Zealand, given we can do more, and a lower percentage from another country, to allow them to participate, but acknowledging that they won't be able to participate in the same way they normally would?
Yeah, I think some of them have some leeway for that in them in any case. And yeah, depending on how you swap the who can make it and who can post it, or elements of post, we're keen to engage a lot of post for New Zealand at this time, as soon as that's possible. But yeah, I think we've got to manage those potential variations. Some treaties have a lot of flexibility and some don't.
We've had a question just about funding for business development to ensure that sole traders learn to create sustainable businesses. Just wondering, are you both open to this idea, and do you have any other ideas from, has anything you've seen been successful from other industries or other countries? The reason why I guess I'm asking this is that I think there's been quite a few courses run in business development, but there still seems to be for sustainable businesses, but there still seems to be a call for it from the industry.
Yeah, we've run some in the past in partnership with the guilds, and some even as the Film Commission on its own. I just think supporting or creating professional development around business sustainability is going to always be relevant, because even without COVID, the context for business is always changing. And I think sustainability of businesses is a really interesting issue. It came up a lot in the discussions with the broadcasters and media side of it. Sustainability versus plurality. How big is a business that can survive? How big, how small? What are the elements that can give you a capacity to withstand something quite as significant as this impact of COVID?
Yeah, true.
There's probably a couple of points I might add to that, Sharon. I mean, I think Annabelle's right. It seems to me that probably the best thing for us to do is just to continue to support the guilds in their actions and activities around the needs of their members. I definitely think, business sustainability in this time is a topic we should be thinking about. I actually think We've already talked a bit about health and safety protocols. I think there's some really, really good work going on already out there. I think the screen sector COVID group's doing some work around that. I know the Techos Guild is doing some work around that. I've talked to a couple of producers who have already been sort of thinking about how they would manage their sort of health and safety protocols as we kind of move along the spectrum of what we're encountering. The other thing for me, the really, really big one, the really concerning one, I think, is actually mental health. And that's actually not about the mental health of people that are finally back and working. It's actually the mental health of the people that aren't working, and how do we get to them, and how do we make sure that they're being really well cared for and looked after. I certainly don't have the answer to that, but I think it's something that we will need to put our backs into a little bit, because we're going to be faced with some real big issues in the coming weeks and months.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, on the business sustainability one, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think in outside of the screen industry, what's become apparent is it's not just the small companies that are struggling in a recession type, which would normally suffer in a recession, but it's the big companies that are really struggling as well.
Yeah.
So I think it's sort of throwing. It's really, it is a new world in that respect, because traditionally, the bigger you were, the better chance you had of survival, but that's not necessarily the case any longer.
Yeah.
There's a lot more at risk on the table in some cases with large companies.
Richard, I don't have anything else, so.
No, I haven't got anything else. Annabelle and Cam, is there anything you'd like to, any messages you'd like to get out there, or anything that you require from the industry, or anything else that you'd like to wrap up with?
Look, I just want to say thank you. I mean, we are still getting, I'm getting a lot of really wonderful, proactive sort of emails and notes through. There are a lot of groups out there. There's a lot of people with kind of really well-meaning ideas that all have, brilliant thoughts. We're doing our bit, Annabelle and I, to kind of try and summarise those as eloquently as we can, and getting them into MCH as part of that whole idea around stimulus or rescue or whatever else. I definitely pick up on the point I think made earlier in the interview that the guilds are really, really useful as well. I mean, I know I'm not plugging SPADA necessarily, but we are on a call with you guys. Look, we have a really, really good relationship with SPADA, obviously with Sandy and with Sharon and Richard. So, I think, as Annabelle said, please keep the ideas coming through directly, but also, use the guilds as well. We are genuinely doing everything we can down here.
Yeah, I think moving through the guilds, or people really thinking about the value of their particular guild at this time, is actually part of what's going to make New Zealand stronger, with or without a COVID context. And I've felt that a long time, for the whole time that I've been here, is that it's really the sign of the strength of a country's industry if you've got strong guilds and associations and strong membership. And if people engage, even if they don't agree with what their guild or association always does, please engage, because we can all make it better together. And strangely, that COVID is causing a lot more discussion and connection, as did the 2030 strategy, and I can only see good stuff coming out of it. And similarly, we appreciate feedback, negative, positive, and I can promise you we get both. And we mostly get negative, but that's all right. And we really appreciate that people speak up and tell us how things are. And we just see that as part of what our job is, to receive that kind of feedback. Constructive is good.
That is really happy. Just to finish, and given we're heading into Easter, and I think it's been a tough couple of weeks for everyone, and it's very easy to sort of get sucked into a negative spiral. What positives have you seen? Are you seeing coming out of this situation? So we finish on a good note.
Look, I have had amazing engagement from all parts of the industry. I mean, I was just on the phone with Martin Stewart from Sky just before this call. I was on the phone to Sinead from Stuff last night. They're probably not necessarily calls that I would necessarily have made in the first kind of couple of weeks of being involved here. So, everyone is kind of working together. I think that's the thing that Martin started off saying on the call, is actually, you know, what we're seeing is a lot of collegiality and kind of cooperation and trying to work out solutions for ourselves. I've personally had a whole bunch of emails from producers who have put their own sort of situation aside and have gone, here's some ideas, here's, you know, here's what maybe you want to know, here's some projects that we're aware of. They've kind of got around each other and summarized things and sent them through. So, you know, the groups that are out there doing amazing work. I mean, Felicity as part of the COVID group and others. So no, look, the worry for me is people out of work, right? That is really, really concerning, and what the economy is going to look like over the next little while. There's no question that is a concern. But I have to say, you know, people seem to be dealing with this in a really resilient way. You know, we're all at home. We're just talking at the start of the call, Sharon sort of trying to manage, you know, childcare with two parents that are working, you know. It's, look, yeah, as I say, I've been really delighted with the level of engagement I've had across the spectrum.
Yeah, and so from our point of view, what we're seeing is an incredible resilience that producers have, and a kind of determination to come up with new ways of operating in this different environment. The fact that there's so much innovation and creative thought around what can we do, how can we, you know, sort this out. You know, it's a testament to this industry, and I think people do get stronger from harsh things, and I see New Zealand producers and crews and everybody already doing that. But yeah, the biggest thing is people working together. That's the part that's been the important plus out of this, what we're learning about each other through working together more and connecting more, weirdly connecting more through virtual systems that we're using.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a great way to finish. Thank you to you both, and to you and to everyone else. Have a good Easter.
Thanks, everybody.
Good to see you, mate.
Thanks,
guys.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Bye.